To the third session of football business in the Global Soccer Conclave. What a brilliant two sessions we have had with the plenary session from Joe Morrison and experts, and the next session on 5G information highway by Sid Kohli and the panelists. I think it was a brilliant session to start with, and hopefully we can keep up this session in a brilliant way as well. So it's really nice. However, when you see the 5G can literally elevate, people are discussing the problems and solutions, but what about events? And you know what? During the pandemic, events has taken a toll, and that's where we are to discuss what has happened and how things are and how we are going to go forward. So I'm very, very proud to announce the panelists for today. So here we are, and first we have Stephanie Brands. We are glad to welcome Stephanie, a vastly experienced freelance television sports presenter and commentator from Australia. So Stephanie has a brilliant career, an illustrious career as a broadcaster with SBS, Nine Sports, Fox Sports, ESPN, name it. She's been part of the broadcasting panels. She has even worked in FIFA World Cup, London Paralympic Games, Asian Cup, and also she was part of the Russian World Cup as a presenter. So it's amazing to have you, Stephanie, here. Welcome. Next on the panel is G. Srinivasan. We are glad to have you, Srini, fondly referred by people here in India. So it's popular and he's created a unique solution with the sports industry called Projo, which is a platform to create dreams and dreams for passionate youth who want to work in the sports industry. Prior to this, he has about 18 years of experience as a marketing strategist. He has worked with multiple brands and multiple companies, like staging great shows for Indian Super League and Indian Premier League, mega events of Indian sports. Welcome, Srini. And then we have Jan Esther Subirats, my good friend joining from Barcelona. So he's a guest faculty at MBA Sports Management Program at UCAM. He's a coach himself previously, but more than that, he's an event management expert, working both in the local as well as national events. He has worked in Euro 2020, which I'm going to definitely go on and touch upon later. He has worked in great events like Mare Nostrum Cup. He's been part of various events in football, basketball, and futsal. So let's hear from Jan on specific programs as well. And finally, we have the last panelist, S. Dash Sharma, doctor. So he's a sports medicine specialist, presently part of core committee of athletic management by Sports Authority of India. I'm welcoming you all. So hopefully you have a great session. So to touch upon first, Stephanie, yes, when it comes to the events, event presentation, venue presentation, and broadcasting room presentation, how the experiences as a sports broadcaster or a presenter vary in each of these areas?
Well, it's been very interesting across all areas. I'm in New York at the moment at the US Open tennis, and that's varied greatly. Last year, I presented the US Open from home in Australia, and it was all virtual. I didn't actually see any live tennis. So now I'm back at the US Open in New York. There are no daily checks for anything. There's no health checks, but you cannot enter as a broadcaster or as a fan without proving that you are vaccinated. So various things have certainly changed across both the events and the broadcasting perspective. I worked on the W League, which is the women's football in Australia. It was the first event, their final, when the pandemic locked Australia down. So it was very, very quiet. It sounded like a training run. You could hear every kick. There was no capacity for fans, and it was very, very difficult. With the Australian Open tennis that year, it was half capacity across the whole venue, but at least you could hear some atmosphere. And that's what made it so difficult, because the acoustics in the different sports, that has a big effect on what it's like for the broadcasters and for the actual athletes as well. When it comes to event venue and broadcasting presentation, the fans are spaced out. I think that will change as capacity increases, and we're seeing that certainly from an Australian perspective. We see that overseas now. Ticketing systems must allow for that. There's no paper tickets, I think, anymore. Social distancing in lines. A lot of event venues now deliver food to seats to stop fans moving around. I know when the Sydney Cricket Ground was operating, the reduced capacity had some of the fans very, very happy that there were no lines to get drinks and no lines to use the bathroom. I think that we will see masks in indoor venues stay for quite some time in countries that can enforce that. And from a broadcasting perspective, the days of interviewing close up are very different. On court and on field, the athlete has their own microphone on a stand that they do not touch. The broadcaster is 6 feet away. The press conferences here in New York, you can only attend if you're a broadcaster from the home country of your player. Every other journalist is required to attend by Zoom. But we know that 100% capacity in the venue, the fans make so much difference to the athletes. And for broadcasters, while traveling across borders in Australia is still very problematic, it can be done virtually, but the fans, they are absolutely crucial to the event. So I hope that that's something that when it comes back, it stays. And because without having live fans and without having the fan engagement, we don't have professional sport.
Oh, that's amazing. I mean, like you clearly explained in terms of how the event presentation and venue and broadcast clearly suffered over the time. It's nice to see that some areas, some countries are good to go with the events. Like, for example, US Open, Mr. Pawan, like nice to see that it's in full swing. When it comes to other regions in India, for instance, we're still struggling to get the fans in because of the various restrictions and different level of pandemic situation here. We'll definitely come on the fans point. Maybe we'll discuss more on that. And now I'm switching out to Jan. Yes, Jan, it will be nice. You can literally, you're someone who have been able to work both on small regional events to even international football events. I just want to understand pre-pandemic, what were the striking operational differences in these type of events and how this has changed post-pandemic?
Wow, a big question. But now, first, I would like to explain the difference between a regional or local event among Euro, among FIFA World Cup. When you try to work or develop a project in a local area, in a regional area, you need to understand probably you are not, you don't need a lot of people. That's the first difference. If you are developing a local project, probably with few people, with not more than 10 people, you can develop most of the tournament. But when you move to the mega events, we are talking about hundreds or thousands of people. Then that's a big difference, because if you need to align all of these people with the vision of the company, with the vision of the project, I think it's clear the difference between a local project when you only need to talk in the same table, there are all the people. But when you move to the mega event, if we are talking about FIFA or UEFA, you need to align all the employees with the same vision, trying to get the same results in each department. Then another big difference is about the mobility. That's easy because, okay, it's a regional tournament, regional event. There is not a lot of people moving from around, from other countries, from other continents, no. But when we talk about an international or mega event, probably there are people coming from all around the world. Then in this pandemic situation, they are applying not only the restrictions of each country, they are so important because, for example, if the United States citizens are not allowed to travel to, it's an example, to Spain, or also the restrictions of the receiving people. If you are receiving people, you have your own regulations about pandemic situation. That it's so difficult to manage the situation for the big mobility of the people. Then also an important difference, it's about the budget of the event. If we are talking about local or only if we could talk about only Spanish event, there is a budget, normal budget, but when we talk with a mega event, it's a budget with a lot of sponsors, a lot of TV rights, and a lot of things involved to cover all the departments. Then, if talking about departments, you can imagine in a little event or a small event, there are 1, 2, 3 departments, and most of the people are making multitasking. Then in a mega event, you are specifically working in only one task, because there are a lot of people in charge of other duties. And also this applies for the whole process, because when the planning, during the execution of the project, there is a lot of people involved, and how the communication is between the different departments, the different people involved in the event. And this applies also for the protocols of the job environment, because I also say, okay, if you are in a local event, there is all the people around the table. Then it's too easy to, okay, you are in charge of this duty, you are in charge of this duty, it's too easy. But imagine there are a lot of departments, now actually most of the people working at home, it's too difficult to coordinate, to communicate in different. And finally, the rhyme, because in a local project, okay, it's more calm. But when you are involved in a mega event, it's blast, 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 lightning. It's all going so fast. That's the main abstract of the main difference between local and mega event.
Okay, we'll definitely come back to you on terms of how you are doing it post pandemic and how it's happening right now. But right now, I'm going to quickly go to our expert from India, Srinivasan Ji. So, Srinivas, you are someone who has been able to work in mega events in India, both national and international, ISL and IPL. So, how has the event hosting and operations changed during the pandemic? And when do you actually expect the whole scenario to be restored to normalcy?
Hi, everyone, and thanks for having me here. I think when is a question, I think whoever answers that should be given a prize, would probably be a fine astrologer and a soothsayer. We all hope that it comes back to normal. We've seen crowds coming to venues across the world, whether it's cricket, football, and they slowly started coming back all over the world. And as Stephanie also mentioned, that you, as long as you show that you are vaccinated, I think crowds could be allowed at venues. So I think the pandemic has been bad because it sort of hit economy pretty badly, but it's also sort of exposed a lot of things, and it's shown a lot of good things that that I guess we as people in the sports business space were taking too much for granted, like the importance of tech. Right. For us, yeah, it was just there. I mean, tech is an enabler, right? But to sort of highlight the fact that how important is it, and how sort of it will and how will it help sport as and when it tries to come back was a sheer eye opener. I guess you usually technology in sport takes about new ideas come every 3, 5, 7 years, but it's come in a year and a half. The advancement, the second point is the advancement of that tech, which has, I mean, if you had no option, there were no people in stadiums. So how do you sort of get the same experience to fans? I guess all of us were caught napping. And we, as people in the sports business, I guess will be a lot more aware and a lot more conscious that if something like this happens, how do you cover pretty much all bases? The other thing that the pandemic sort of did, from an event perspective, is it pretty much wiped out 2 or 3 sources of revenue for most people. So I guess the other awakening was reduce the risk by depending so much on a source of revenue. Classic example, for example, ticket sales, right? If there are no people in the stadium, there will be no ticket sales, right? Broadcasters will ask for a cut in the fee. So how do you sort of make up for it? So I think that has been probably the biggest one, other than the advancement of technology, on how one can sort of safeguard yourself, or at least mitigate the risk to a certain extent. The other thing that had happened, and Stephanie alluded to it towards the end of her point, was the increase in fan engagement. Right, fan engagement was always assumed to be on ground. Now there is nobody on ground. Right, so how do you sort of reach out to the fan at home? So was this a stopgap arrangement that you were doing because there were no people in the stadium? The answer is no, because if the same experience could be given to people sitting anywhere in the world, I think you would have achieved something that you won't have ever sort of even dreamt of, or something would have come, or something that would have come about in maybe 5, 7, 10 years. with the advancement of more technology. So I think a lot of people ask, I mean, for example, how many jobs reduced, right, of people who were working in fan engagement on ground. However, a lot more people got employed in digital because they were doing things that they'd never done before to reach people digitally. Correct? The engagement still had to happen, and probably on a scale which is much bigger than what happens on the ground, because you reach people differently at their homes and somehow try to recreate the same experience. Absolutely awesome. Classic case in point is the Indian Super League. I mean, had a fan wall where people could sort of look at being present in the stadium, right? By saying, okay, yes, I mean, I can see myself on television in the stadium, which is something that would have never happened if life was normal, right? I guess last but not the least was mental health. Everybody talks about mental health of athletes. Naomi Osaka has been the biggest proponent. But what about people who are working there? They're also isolated, right?
Yeah.
So I think their mental health also, I mean, it's been an awakening for mental health of all the people working on the venue, whether they're working in events, broadcasting, or anything. Mental health, I guess, has sort of been another point, in my opinion, which the pandemic has brought about. And people have, at least the good thing is, people have started talking about it.
Oh, wow. When I asked this question, I never thought you would touch on the mental health part. So I'm just going to go to Stephanie on this, because mental health is something. Stephanie, I would like to ask, you previously touched upon with the fans and without the fans, the differences. Yes, as a broadcaster, you would have present so many events at the venue with the fans, with the atmosphere. What were the emotional or psychological changes which you had while hosting events during the pandemic without the fans? I'm pretty sure, did your mental health go for a toss, or like it was fine?
Yeah, I think Shri touched on a couple of the initiatives perhaps that took place to try and engage the fans. And I work on sport as a broadcaster and also as a host of corporate functions. So I saw firsthand some of the things that Shri referred to, with the corporate functions completely cancelled. The hostings were cancelled. And when you attend as a fan, that experience has gone when they closed the stadiums to zero capacity. What we did create, certainly in Australia and around the world, was virtual watch parties. So to try and bring the fans in by all watching together on a Zoom call. It's not the same. It's nowhere near the same as attending an event together with your friends. But we had feedback from so many people who live by themselves and couldn't see other people, that it made them feel like they were watching together. And of course, Australia went back into lockdown during the European Championships. And I was supposed to be in Amsterdam working with the Dutch team on the broadcast, but I couldn't go. And the alternative over in Australia was, you can go to the pub and you can watch it with all your friends at 3 o'clock in the morning, because it's a horrible time zone in Australia. However, 2 weeks in, it locks down and no one can go out. So everyone has to start try and watch together on these Zoom watch parties. And it made such a difference. And the feedback from people was, I live alone and this has really helped me to connect to people. And yeah, that was something really special. I think the other things we did were, certainly in Australia, you could buy a virtual seat. So as you said, you could see yourself in the stadium, and perhaps that helped raise revenue as well. But Yoga, the fans are crucial to sport presentation. They create the color, they add the emotion to sporting events. It cannot be the same without them. We saw some football competitions, and as you mentioned, I also work for ESPN. The basketball tried this, and the tennis as well, to bring in virtual fan noise. And it's to simulate the reactions and give the vibe of fans being there. But those of you who work in football will agree, you can't simulate that. At an English Premier League game, the mood can shift from the fans chanting all together to all of a sudden to cheers and groans and those reactions. It's tricky to simulate. So we had most sports played in an atmosphere that was very, very quiet. You could hear every movement of the ball, every comment of the athletes. And in various events it changed because, as I mentioned in the tennis, very few people are required to make it sound like it's very full and to have an atmosphere. When I was working on the Australian Open at the beginning of the year, halfway through the event, the government mandates a 5-day snap lockdown. So the curfew starts at midnight. At 11 o'clock, you still have Novak Djokovic on court, and they stop play and remove all the fans. And the energy and the difference in the mood in the venue was palpable. The play goes down. It was all very strange. But one place I have to say that fans have made a difference is in the viewing figures, because with people stuck at home at the height of the pandemic, the numbers of viewers have never been higher. For the Olympic Games in Australia, it was skyrocketing. We had 2, sometimes 3 states in lockdown and nothing else to do but watch television. They finished with Netflix, they finished with everything else, and it was all for live sport. But I hope that with the high vaccination rates, the fan experience will be restored as soon as possible.
Oh, what a brilliant way. I remember the Novak Djokovic match as well, and you could literally see Novak dropping his game once the fans were out and struggle to just win the game. So, I mean, like, it is really nice to know the perspective of somebody who's working in the scenes, but also literally able to watch athletes struggling without the fans. Thank you, Stephanie. I'll come back to you. And now I'd like to press ahead with Ian. And you're someone who was working in the ticketing aspect in the Euro 2020 in Spain. Mm-hmm. So what were the information given to you? Was it that the fans were completely going to be back in the stadium? Like, what are the measures which you adopted during the COVID to ensure that the ticketing aspect of an event was in good terms?
Okay, yeah. Firstly, I would like to start talking about, okay, we are deeply inside on the uncertain times. That's the most important we need to understand, because, okay, today, for example, in La Liga in Spain, there are allowed 30% of the attendance to the stadiums. In Premier League, it's close to the 100%, but each country, each competition have their own rules. That's the most important we need to understand. We need to be so resilient to adapt as quick as possible to the situation. That's the most important. Starting from that, okay, during the UEFA Championship, we had allowed around 20% attendance in Sevilla Stadium, for example, and we used only online tickets, no physical tickets. That's difficult because most of us understand there are, all of us are so able to use our smartphone to get the tickets, blah, blah, blah. But what happened with old people? That's a difficult situation for them. We have the numbers of the Euro Championships and not all people attending to the stadiums. Then there is a break in our target group we need to solve. Then, I repeat again, there are different restrictions depend on the country. For example, just now, there is no restriction for the United States citizens to fly to Spain, for example, but there is a recommendation to not fly. It's not the same, but it affects a lot to the attendance of any events. Because if your government is not recommending you to fly to Spain, okay, at least I was thinking a lot about the option to fly. Then we need to understand not only the restrictions where the venue is, also the restrictions for the target group attending to the event. Also for the participants, because there is now recently a big problem for La Liga because there is a lot of restriction for the South America. Then for the national teams games, now there are a lot of players who need to go to South America and then coming back, they need to be self-isolated and there is a big problem.
watch football without South American fans, huh?
Yeah, of course. Then what happened about the test or vaccination when you fly abroad? Most of us have a lot of examples about, okay, if you are not 100% vaccinated, you cannot go, or if you have a positive test, you need to stay at home, or you need to stay self-isolated in an hotel. When you fly, for example, China, when you arrive, you need to stay 2 weeks. Then imagine if you wanted to create an event in China, you need to plan. All the participants should arrive 2 weeks in advance. And what happened with the fans? Only Chinese fans are allowed to attend. Then also another thing who are so important is when you try to sell tickets, you need to get the options to refund, because if you are test positive or you have any problems with your travel restrictions, you need to refund all the money. That is a big problem. Imagine if you are selling more than 1 million tickets. What happened? Then there are little issues like the face mask, because all of us know how it's going with the face mask, attending all the events. If you cannot drink, if you cannot eat, that it's not the atmosphere is not the same. And face mask, I think, we are dressing face mask for a long time, I think so. Then there is more info need for the registrations, to get tickets, because now it's on the board. For example, what happened with the vaccinated people, with the are you allowed to go to a stadium? Are you allowed to go to a restaurant? It's only an example. Then you need to provide this info. You need to ensure all the spectators, fans, participants need to provide you more info than before now. Then about medical protocols, for example, what happened if one player attending to event is test positive? What happened if, imagine you are playing FC Barcelona against Manchester United, and when FC Barcelona arriving, one player is test positive. All the team need to be isolated. The game cannot be done. Then you need to rearrange all the, it's so difficult this time. But I repeat again, resilience to adapt as quick as possible to this kind of situations. And then finally, I'm going back to the beginning. On certain period or certain scenario, need to get players, to get agents, to get event managers deeply inside on the task of, okay, we are in a new era. We need to work differently than we worked before, because now the rules change. And now it's not, okay, this is my book. I work the whole life with that way. No, it works. You need to create your new book to work to new era.
Perfect. I mean, like, it's just so disheartening to see you have to go through a lot to conduct this. And I think the way you handled it, I think from the outset, Euro 2020 was a major success, and following, I think Olympics have been a brilliant show of event management as well, Paralympics included. Hopefully, we can all put this up and put a great show in Qatar 22, which is the mega event for all football fans. Okay, there's a particular reason why I've not gotten the other panelists. So now I ask, just because we're discussing the Euro 2020 part, I request Mr. S. Dash Sharma he's a sports medicine expert, and I just wanted to touch upon this particular incident which was talked about and which was managed very well. It's the incident surrounding around Christian Eriksen in the Denmark game. We were all lauded for the way the referee, the players handled it. I'm of course going to come on to Stephanie Brands later regarding the broadcasting part. But before that, I want to just touch upon with Das Sharma regarding What do you think should be the way, and how do you think the situation was very much handled from a medical perspective?
Thank you, Joga, and firstly, apologetic to all the panelists here, because most probably I am creating a scenario which is just the pandemic where the visibility and the eye contacts are restricted. So it is kind of a live demo I am giving where the eye contact is not there. I am apologetic for it. And most probably on an event management day, a doctor is sitting mainly because most probably the COVID and maybe just a case in scenario where the Ericsson case, as you have mentioned. Otherwise, for event management, there are a lot of other things to discuss in terms of sponsorship, marketing. And once Srinivasan, being a market guru, discuss about something about mental health, where a presenter like a Stephanie mentioned about vaccination, and where a John Estler, who is a logistic in charge, mentioned about something that how ultimately the COVID is changing. Most probably that is the reason I am here. Yes, the case of Ericsson is not something which is not seen before, but yes, in a very, very important match, the starting game for them and how they have managed not just the medical team there, but the team as a whole, showing a team spirit as well as the best medical management part is something which has to be emulated. We have to understand that once there is a match kind of a football, there are two types of medical resource available. One is who is along with the team, who is basically there to give the immediate care so that the player can go inside or take a decision that the player will come out. However, for any kind of critical injury, there is a logistic team who is basically the event management group, and there has to be a medical cell, not just COVID, but a medical cell who will be providing the emergency care. The most important part is the quick care at the ground and evacuation of the patient to a designated hospital. That is a very, very important thing, that once we plan a match, generally we don't think about a cardiac catastrophe. Most of the time we must be thinking about an ACL injury or a knee injury or a sprain or that type of thing, which can be managed at the ground, and then subsequently, even if I take that player after 2 hours to a station, is okay with it, not a big problem. But for a cardiac care, the most important part, what these UEFA has told us, or most probably reminded us well, that in the ground, there has to be a quick reaction team with advanced cardiac protocol, with the defib, and then quick evacuation, and you require a super specialty hospital in the vicinity, so that has to be earmarked. If it is a congested day, might not be the time of pandemic, but if it is a normal time congested day, you have to create a green corridor so that the ambulance can move really fast, reach there on time, and there is a adequate communication from the ground to the hospital, so that hospital is already ready to attend that patient. In case of Ericsson, all the tick box were properly handled, and therefore it is a case to study how best a critical emergency can be managed.
Wow, it's amazing. You touched upon the reactionary aspect as well as the anticipatory aspect. I think it was a brilliant lesson for everybody. So regarding this, Stephanie, there was a major noise around the internet from the fans as well as from many people, stakeholders across the game, that there should have been some there were some images which could have been avoided while covering the event. Can you just talk us through what are the protocols which have been instructed to a broadcaster in advance to an event, just in case there are emergencies? While an accidental thing has happened, just in case some feed has happened, how do you manage these kind of situations where the protocols are different and what you see or unfold is different?
Well, I think from the media perspective, it's a difficult one, because I was, of course, watching that game, and when that happens, and I thought the way the team surrounded Ericsson was perfect, because they were blocking out the cameras. And as a human being, I feel that is completely intrusive at such a time to have the camera so close. But from a broadcaster perspective, they are trying to make the fans at home feel like they are there. And, you know, everyone trying to see what's going on, and they want the latest news, and no one has it. So I feel that it would be better if, you know, you stay on a wide shot and you can see there's activity in a part of the field, and your commentators will need to talk through what the situation is and whatever feedback they get as soon as possible. But I don't agree with the close-ups on serious injuries. And I think they went to Ericsson's, was it his family or his partner in the crowd? And that makes me feel very uncomfortable that you would intrude on someone like that. But from a broadcasting perspective, I understand why for them it's, you know, it's the jackpot of broadcasting because everyone is tuned in. In Australia, we don't even have on the big screens in the ground, if there's a penalty call, there's no replay. If there's an incident, there's no replay. We have VAR, so sometimes you see the replay that they're getting, but often there's no inclusion for the fan at the ground to see that, and you only get that broadcast at home. So I think it differs for different people, but in an emergency situation like this, I think that it's, I would be much more comfortable if they take a step back and keep you informed through the broadcast, but not straight in the faces or showing very private moments. I'm not happy with that.
Great. I mean, it was a very honest reply, I think so. And regarding the screening, yes, the situation unfolded and they had to take some measures. But what we also saw is like after a few moments, like sometime later, UEFA also came back and conducted the game. In your perspective, having worked with big companies like BCCI and hosting major events, how did you see UFA's decision to come and hold the game? And in your experience, did you come across any emergency situations and how did you handle them?
Well, you know, firstly, I think when the pandemic was on and the pandemic started, it sort of put and brought the whole world to a grinding halt. And there were only moments of despair that you saw. And when the Bundesliga started, it sort of gave everybody a bit of hope. So sports was probably the first sector which started, and within sport, it was football. It gave people a lot of hope that yes, you know, we can beat this. And as we moved on to where we have reached in the last 1 year, I think it's tremendous progress, both in terms of at least getting the matches on. See, because it's not just about sport, and sport is not always fun, right? It's business. It's a serious business, and a lot of people's livelihoods depend on that. And it's not just the players who are being paid millions and millions of dollars, right? It's people who are working there, people in broadcast who are covering the game. It's people who, all the allied services that are associated with sport, right? So it puts a full industry into unemployment. So I think the Bundesliga was a serious ray of hope, saying that yes, we can hold sport. However, we started, you know, the crowd noises came later, whatever happened. But I thought that was a fantastic first step in the right direction. And I think it should be done. It should be done. And as Jan also mentioned, you know, if Barcelona is playing Man United and one player tests positive, I mean, you know, because there's so much dependent on it. There's so much money riding on a particular match, which means to conduct business efficiently, I think you need to sort of ensure that sport goes on, right? From a situation like you mentioned, and emergency situations, yes, loads and loads have happened when when we've been there. So on ground especially, there was a time when I guess there was some fireworks and the smoke stayed, and there was no the visibility was very, very less. So I mean, how could you sort of conduct a game? I mean, a game of cricket, that too. So two things like the game had to be halted because of I mean, there were floods in Chennai. There was an ISL game going on, and the whole of Tamil Nadu was flooded, right?
Was that the game? Yeah.
And the match had to be halted because of lightning strikes. Yeah, and fans had to be sort of evacuated. Having said that, the team which was playing Chennai that day, Mumbai, had to be isolated in a hotel, and all the schedules went haywire. They had to undergo, you know, maybe a 24 to 48 hour bus ride to get to another state, where they took a flight to Kolkata and beat Kolkata. So, so what I'm saying is, I mean, it's for fans in general, you know, it seems like, yeah, it doesn't matter, they'll play the next game, but it doesn't work like that, right? if one match changes, 15 matches change, right? And in especially in sports. So I guess situations like that come about very, very often. And with the pandemic, it's one more dimension. I mean, not that we didn't have our share of problems, right? I mean, the pandemic has just sort of brought in about 1,000 more. What happens if a player gets quarantined? What happens if the support staff gets quarantined? What happens if the driver who's driving them gets COVID, right? So, I mean, you have to have possible scenarios for each of these situations. So yes, I think emergency situations will happen. I guess need to have plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D, plan E ready, like we usually do, but just with an added dimension of keeping the pandemic and its after effects in mind.
I think it's a brilliant statement to make from an event management perspective. People discuss about plan A, B, but from an event management perspective, literally gone into the plan E, and that shows like how strict and like how anticipatory we are in terms of conducting the sport. You touched upon the very important aspect of like having to deal with the problems surrounding the players. Somebody getting positive, with Jan also just mentioned. You also mentioned, and it's also about the support staff. And this is where I just come to the picture of biobubble. Is Dash Sharma, can you please explain like what exactly happens through in a biobubble, and what are the measures which are seriously taken up, and what ensures safety? Can you just like go on situation on this?
Thank you, Joga, once again. And once we are discussing about biobubble, most probably for last 1.5 years, most of us who are associated with this segment are generally aware about the basic protocols. But I'll just put you in perspective where there is a major difference in terms of football, in terms of biobubble. Suppose there is only one-off match where the visiting team is coming and playing. And that means it is a very small duration of engagement. However, suppose it is kind of a scenario where ISL was planned this time, like going with all the teams at a specific area where they are staying for a longer duration and then ultimately playing for the thing. Those two things are absolutely different. The second one needs not only manpower and money, but a lot of meticulous planning. And it is also important from where the player are coming from. The restrictions in that country will ultimately determine by the hosting medical commission that how many days of quarantine is required for that specific team who are coming from a specific area. So to maintaining a biobubble, it is just to create a kind of a, you can say, a cushion period or a quarantine period. Before that, obviously the testing, after that they are testing, and then how many days they are staying. Like Olympic has shown a very good thing where every day the player has been tested through saliva. In an Olympic with so many players, doing that thing is a really good one. But we also have to understand how much cost we can ultimately use for this purpose, where the incoming revenues are less. And here I will request on behalf of Yoga to Srini to basically highlight the revenue part.
I was just coming there.
Yeah, as a medical perspective, it is easier to give a list which can be enormous, exorbitant, and completely like a flawless. But to implement it on ground for so many players, the support staff, and the people who are in contact. Suppose you are staying in a hotel, the hotel staff are coming in contact with you. So to create a biobubble, it has to be really, really tight. Like IPL, for the second time, once they planned in India, they could not continue the thing because of the surge as well as multiple positive case. So yes, there is a challenge to maintain this biobubble. I'm not going into the medical part of it. I just throw a light. If the event is shorter, much easier. If the event is a longer one where multiple teams are coming from different area, lot of things has to be taken care of.
Thanks, Josh Sharma. You touched upon it. And while it is even to think, it is just logic to the way you think you said, it's kind of logic, but I think to put it to practice, it's really, really difficult. And kudos to everybody at the first line of service to do all this really enabled work. Yes, it's a nice panel because like one panelist has already led to the other panelist. So yes, Srini, you are mentioning about how sports is a business, and however we see it as a bad word in terms of money. Only money ensures that the money goes back into the sport and sports keep growing. In terms of the commercial strategies, having worked in these big organizations, what are all the permanent changes when it comes to the commercial strategies which are here to stay?
Absolutely. I think, as I mentioned earlier, that sports is a business. And for example, if life was normal and in a regular event you would make $100, yeah, not having an event would mean a loss of $100, right? And if 100 was the revenue, you're making 20, 30, 40, whatever. But in the pandemic, as Dr. Das also mentioned, the revenue is reduced from 100 to 40, and we make only 20. So should it be 0 or 20? I think the whole world will take 20 right now, right? Yeah. Because a lot is at stake. So from a commercial perspective, I think, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of revenue streams have been found, which I think the rights holders were either taking it for granted or were giving it free. Classic cases in point is the digital assets, right? Digital, earlier it was I'm giving you XYZ as a sponsor, and you take this one also free. But now in the pandemic, they've realized was that XYZ in terms of revenue is not happening. This is the only thing I need to sell. So a recent article said that the Premier League clubs only on digital assets after the pandemic outbreak have made $1 billion. Wow. That shows that all that which you were giving away for free all these years has a lot of value. So that's what the pandemic has sort of taught you, to think a little beyond and value each of those assets that you have. As I mentioned earlier, the importance of tech has resulted in creating newer assets, predominantly digital, which can be monetized as well. Fan engagement, another point that I had alluded to earlier. Fan engagement, of course, I mean, it's possible to monetize that as well. If you have stuff being delivered to your seat, I mean, there's no reason why stuff can't be delivered to your home as well, right? In terms of whether it's food, beverage, or experience. God forbid something like this could happen another 10 years later. I think the world will be a lot more prepared. Classic case in point is, I mean, I'm a Manchester United fan. I've been to Old Trafford a few times and watched my team play. Now, there's nothing which is stopping Manchester United for recreating that experience for me at home, for people all over the world. And with the rise of AI, etc., I mean, there would be the gold standard, which would always be Old Trafford, right? The silver or the bronze standard, especially with the rise of artificial intelligence, virtual reality, augmented reality, etc., would be to recreate the same experience at home. Now that is a revenue stream. It doesn't matter if people are not there at the stadium. It comes to your home. That stadium-like experience has to come to your house, to where you're sitting with your friend with a glass of beer in your hand, right? So what I'm saying is, it's stuff like this which possibly will help sport look at things differently, realize the importance of tech, especially the assets which they can sort of monetize, and fan engagement being taken to an absolutely new level, which I think was lacking a little bit. People did their bit saying, yeah, we're getting enough people in the stadium. 30 to 33% of my revenue comes from ticket sales. Let it be. Life is great. But when the 33 became 0, I guess, and the broadcast revenue started dropping. Because broadcast revenue started dropping, sponsorship revenue also reduced. So what earlier, the point that I was saying earlier, you were getting 100 earlier, now you're getting about 40 or 50, because each of them are related to each other. So I guess it's about creating a lot of new assets. I mean, few other things. I mean, if you were to sort of look at a big crystal ball and seeing in the future, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if I could choose my seat in the stadium while watching the match from home. I could choose any angle that I want to, right? I mean, I guess going forward, I mean, all of us remember that great commercial. I used to work in Nike at that time, which is Take It to the Next Level, where the one that Guy Ritchie made, where you see where you see the game from a player's perspective, right? And I'm pretty sure from a broadcast point of view also, there would be a time when fans could see it from ex-player's perspective, or a midfielder's perspective, or a striker's perspective, or a goalkeeper's perspective. So what I'm saying is, things like these are possible. It's just that we haven't thought about them. And once someone starts thinking and sort of starts evolving such technology, I think sky's the limit. It doesn't matter whether a pandemic comes or not. If sport goes on, with the revenues continues to flow in, and the whole ecosystem is happy and growing.
Wow, very greatly put. And one interesting point is that you mentioned yourself as a Man United supporter. Well, Cristiano Ronaldo is going to make some good amount of commercials as well, but it doesn't help me because I'm a Liverpool fan. But although maybe, as Stephanie France mentioned, maybe we'll end up watching the game in a virtual screening regularly from now on. So yes, we've come to the fair end of our session. From a perspective of the sports restoration and events restoration, I would like to listen from you all as a roundup. And I would like to start with you, Srini, in terms of you having a platform to help people come into the sport business as a platform. What do you see where the sports is going in terms of the jobs? And you can mention in terms of like what are the things which we can look forward to in terms of the commercial side of things, and Stephanie can mention it from the broadcasting point, and Jan can mention it from hosting the events perspective.
So thank you for this. I mean, I hadn't referred to my company in a long time. Yes, I run a company called Sportjo, short form for Sports Jobs, which helps people work in sports. So all the 24 years of my experience in sports is sort of been poured into this company. What we have seen, our company was born. It's a pure pandemic baby, born in the pandemic. It got funding in the pandemic. It has placed people in the pandemic, and we've sort of grown and seen traction in the pandemic. So we have a database of close to about 240 companies in India who are engaged in sports, and 204 of them are not hiring. So I mean, they pulled down their shutters because of the scenario that there is. So we've placed close to about 60 people in 36 companies, right? From interns to COOs. It's about, it doesn't matter which stage of life you're in, we will have a job for you. And as things open up, as we discussed earlier, I mean, we aim to, right now we place one person every 5 days. The aim is to place at least 5 people in 1 day going forward as sports opens. The interesting part of this is, we've not even placed one person in operations, in event management, because there is no sports, right? But we have placed a lot of people in digital, in fan engagement, in content, and a whole lot of allied areas. But the key thing is not to just sort of sit and wait for things to happen the way they used to happen, right? As I mentioned, because sports is changing because of tech, there will be a whole lot of new roles which probably stakeholders are also not aware of, right? So maybe it's our responsibility to maybe train people for those roles to be ready when the gates open, right? So I think there will be, while the regular roles as operations, digital, etc. will continue, but there will be emergence of a lot of new roles, which could be a mixture of two, a hybrid of 2 or 3 roles, which would emerge going forward. And as Sportjo, I mean, we'll be pretty much ready with people across levels, using this time of the pandemic to train them, to coach them, and to ensure that they are job ready as and when the market opens. So I think there'll be a mixture of a few roles, etc. going forward. And most importantly, there are a lot of roles which have not yet even been invented.
Really nice. Yes, over to Stephanie. What do you see where this is ending?
Well, if I speak from an Australian perspective, we're in, I don't think you call it a unique position, but it's perhaps unusual in that we have some of the lowest rates of COVID cases and of COVID deaths in the world, yet half our country is in lockdown because they're determined to keep it like this. So not only can Australians not leave their own country to travel overseas, you can't travel between states either. You need an exemption. My parents live in Queensland. I live in New South Wales. I cannot go and see them. I haven't seen them for almost a year now because you need an exemption to go across. The same has happened for the sporting teams over the course of the past 2 years. They receive advice from the government that the borders might close because there's been cases in their state. And we've had sports teams that scramble to the airport at midnight to get charter planes to go and play. And one of you mentioned being able to put all of a sporting competition in one place. And Australia has had to do that. They've created sporting hubs for the rugby league, for the AFL, the Aussie rules, for football, to move competitions so that they can keep going, because commercially, that's the only way to keep sport viable. It has to keep playing. I know from speaking to some private equity investors over here in the States and also in Europe, they can be reluctant to put their investment into Australia because it's so prone to closing down and the competition's shut down. So the methodology in Australia now is we're no longer trying to suppress COVID. We want the country vaccinated. And the latest news is that we reach 80% vaccination, and then we open up, yeah, we're not there yet, but hopefully by the end of the year, those vaccination rates will be up. And then we can see things like the Ashes cricket tour, which is due to happen in our summer. We can welcome not just the players, but their families in, because people are reluctant to travel to Australia. They need to do 2 weeks quarantine. I have 3 children, they're grown up. But if I have small children, there is no way I'm going somewhere to stay in a hotel room with them for 2 weeks. That's never going to happen. So I can understand for the athletes, the players, they don't want to do that either. And for Australia, that's been a big problem. I work in women's golf, and our last tournament was cancelled, the Australian Women's Open. For next year, it already looks like it's not going ahead because the players don't want to come in. They can go all around the world to the other countries where they don't have to quarantine. They don't want to come in and do 2 weeks of quarantine. Likewise for the tennis and even for our World Cup qualifiers, we have the Socceroos, our national team. They're playing in the Middle East because they cannot play at home because the government won't let the visiting team come in. So moving forward, Australia needs to reach a point where we open to the rest of the world again, and athletes can come in and come out, and fans can come in and come out. And that means that the engagement with the fans then increases again. And most importantly, and again, one of you mentioned it before, it's not the way we like to think about sport, but it's a business, and commercially we need that to happen to survive. So yeah, I hope it's very soon.
Yes, yeah. Your final touch of points when it comes to events hosting, or what do you think is going to be?
I think I think most of the time I'm using the phrase of the best is yet to come, not specifically if I said 2 years ago it's not properly used, but now I think it's a good time to say, because I think we are learning a lot how to manage the situation, how to adapt quickly to the different restrictions, to the different situations appearing over the globe. And I think for the coming future, I know I don't have the knowledge to say that, but most of the events are gonna be done, probably, but we don't know exactly how we done. In the futures, in the specifically futures, we don't know exactly, because, for example, thinking about the Women's FIFA World Cup coming in the Australia and New Zealand, or Qatar for the men's, or the next Olympics, probably they're gonna be done for sure. About that, we are talking about. There is a lot of people pushing about TV rights, about commercial rights, and blah, blah, blah. But we will need specifically jobs or agents ready to develop this kind of projects in uncertain times.
Okay, perfect. I think you put it really well. I'm literally going to see how I know you're going to the World Cup as well with the ticketing part. So let's see how you're going to host it as well. So I think it was a brilliant panel. In the start, we touched upon like how it was very difficult without the fans, definitely mentioned it. And from there, we went on to how it became an opportunity for fan engagement from the digital side of things. And we literally saw how commercial aspects could be improved from the digital assets as well. Thanks to Sandeepan sir, like she mentioned on how we were equipped in terms of the medical thing. I think it all gives us hope that whatever be the situation, humans find a way to host events, and that is precisely what we are looking at the positives from the session. And hopefully, we'll not able to be, will not get to see any more pandemic, but I'm pretty sure we'll find a way to host events. And thanks everyone for joining, and have a happy weekend. Thank you so much.
Thank you and take care. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Take care. Bye bye.